Hello friends, today we're going to touch upon a topic which may be a little sensitive or controversial. Specifically, what happens if a married woman gets pregnant by a man who is not her husband? It could get a little complicated, so we're going to dive into the legalities of that situation next. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. All right, there are often times that a woman who is going through a divorce process will get pregnant. That's right, either during the divorce process or right before the filing of a divorce, which precipitates the filing of the divorce paperwork. Let's talk about some of the reasons why a woman who is pregnant may be going through a divorce. I don't want to automatically assume that infidelity is the issue, so there are a plethora of reasons that women who are pregnant will be going through a divorce. For instance, if the wife who is pregnant becomes a victim of either domestic violence or abuse at the hands of her spouse, in that scenario, she may simply want to get a divorce to remove herself from a very dangerous situation. Another example may be that one of the parties never wanted the baby to begin with, and the divorce followed thereafter. Also, maybe one of the parties felt that the other tricked them into getting pregnant, and that soured the relationship. When having children, the finances become a really significant issue. Perhaps it accentuates the parties' disagreements and fights, and it leads to a divorce. The final example that I'm going to give is the one that we're going to cover today, when there is a discovery of infidelity. That's right, when the wife gets pregnant by another man who is not her husband. So we're going to get into that right now. Some of the issues that are raised when the parties discover that the wife is pregnant by another man who is not her husband are: will the court allow them to get divorced while the wife is pregnant? Is there a presumption that the husband is the legal father, although he is not the biological or the bio dad? What about the bio dad, the biological father? What is going to be his rights and obligations to the child now that he has gotten someone else's wife pregnant? If the parties separated at birth or prior to the birth, will the husband be allowed to go into the hospital room when the wife gives birth? And finally, does the wife have to share information about the child to her husband if he is not the father of the child? These are all very interesting issues that come to light in the situation that we're talking about today. So now we're going to get into a little bit about the specifics of the state of Florida. Remember that each jurisdiction is different, so everyone should be checking their local statute, but whether a man may be recognized as a father in the state of Florida is often unrelated to biology and genealogy. Specifically, we should talk about the differences between a biological father and a legal father. The biological father is the person who actually fathered the child. Sometimes the biological father is the legal father of the child. However, sometimes the biological father is not. A child's legal father is the person who has all the rights and responsibilities of fatherhood over a particular child. The Florida courts in their decisional case law have been firm and consistent in asserting that a child only has one father and that paternal rights and responsibilities cannot be shared between two or more individuals. So what does that mean? Well, to the surprise of many people, when I tell them this, a child who is either born or conceived while the mother is lawfully married to her husband is presumed to be the child of the mother and her husband, regardless of who the biological father is. So yeah, that's a little bit of a surprise to people, because regardless of who, let's say there's an example in which the parties, they never got officially divorced, they've been separated for like a year or 2 years, then the mom moves on into a different relationship and somehow she gets pregnant by the man in this new relationship. Well, surprise to everybody, if she's still married, the legal father is the husband who she never divorced. So it could complicate some of these different situations in which people haven't gotten divorced and have spent a long time separated and have moved on. So that's an example of that. It could also happen during the proceedings. Let's say that the parties separate, and while the divorce process is actually getting litigated, the wife gets pregnant by her new significant other. In that situation, it could complicate complicate the case. So what happens to the bio dad, the biological father? They call this person usually the putative father or the assumed father, and generally the putative father is not allowed to intervene in the dissolution of marriage proceedings to try to get custody rights if the husband objects. Likewise, or additionally, he will not be able to file for a paternity suit because, as I mentioned previously, Florida law presumes that the husband is the legal father of the child. What is very interesting, though, is that the putative father can actually raise the presumption of paternity that the husband has in any child support proceedings that anyone tries to take against him. So, in other words, if the putative father or the alleged father is not involved in the child's life and either the mother or the husband, who is the legal father, tries to put that person on child support, it'll probably get rejected because that putative father can claim that the law presumes that the husband is the father, therefore he doesn't have to pay child support. So I think it's kind of interesting how the law works in favor of the putative father in the child support arena. All right, so now that we discussed the topic of how the husband is the legal father of any child born during a lawful marriage to his wife, regardless of who the biological father is, let's wrap up some of the other interesting legalities. First, if a woman conceives a child with her husband and subsequently they get divorced and she gets remarried and gives birth to that child while she's married to that subsequent husband, the case law seems to indicate that that subsequent husband during the marriage in which a child was born is the legal father. Additionally, another piece of case law that I really like is that if a man and a woman have a child out of wedlock and after that child is born they get legally married, then the child is deemed to have legally been born during the course of the party's marriage. And I really like that for that type of situation. Now, before I move on to the next part of this video, those of you who watch this show know that there's usually a loophole that I like to talk about. And in this particular case, there's a very narrow loophole in which the putative father or the bio dad or the biological father can try to assert rights over the husband when a child is born during an intact marriage and fathered by somebody else under Florida statute, chapter 742. Specifically, it is narrowly possible for the putative father to establish paternity even over the objection of the husband, who is the legal father of the child born during intact marriage, by asserting the following. First, the putative father has to be able to prove that he has established a relationship with the child or children. And number two, the husband has been remiss in fulfilling his role as a father. So what's a good example of this? It would mean that the putative father, who is the bio dad or the biological father, would have to prove that he established some sort of time sharing or visitation with the child or children, and maybe that he's supporting them. Maybe he's giving them child support or taking them to the doctor or taking them to extracurricular activities. And he would also have to prove that the husband, for whatever reason, has either abandoned or not been involved in the lives of the children. This could be conceivable because if a husband finds out that he is not the biological father of the child born during the marriage, he may check out. He may not want to be involved in children's lives, unfortunately. But if that's the case, it's great that the law provides a fix and that the putative father can come in and try to assert his paternity rights. Furthermore, I would be remiss if I did not discuss some of the further protections that are afforded children in the state of Florida. First and foremost, and this may be a little surprising to some people out there, but parents cannot stipulate in a dissolution of marriage proceeding that the husband is not the lawful or legal father of the wife's unborn child. Such an order is void, leaving open the possibility that that child, when they're born and grow up, can sue that husband, or at that point former husband, for paternity and child support. The Florida public policy and law is also unequivocal in that the parents cannot barter away their children's rights or try to exclude the court from reviewing the terms and conditions of an agreement as they relate to custody, time sharing, visitation, or child support. Additionally, an order in which a husband gives up all parental rights to a child in exchange not to pay child support, which a lot of times that comes up is also void for lack of jurisdiction. That is because this type of agreement tries to sever the parental responsibility between the father and the child without any of the statutory provisions of the statute that relates to termination of parental rights. And finally, a final judgment of dissolution of marriage is res judicata of the paternity issue for any and all children that are born during the course of that marriage, and which that final judgment contemplates. So before we wrap up this video, let's go back to one of the original questions that I asked, which is, can a couple in which the wife is currently pregnant file for divorce? And the answer is yes, they can. However, realize that the court will likely not grant the divorce until the wife gives birth, at which time that couple is going to have a very interesting conversation if the husband is not the biological father or the bio dad. But you know what? Life sometimes is interesting, so hope this information helped. Please feel free to provide some comments about anybody that you may know that is in the situation. I'm a big fan of the Maury Povich show. On that show, this often happens live when the husband isn't necessarily the biological father, and then it turns into chaos. And sometimes the husband, despite not being the biological father, still steps up and wants to be the dad, which is always a really nice thing. So that's a wrap on our topic regarding when the wife gets pregnant by some other person who is not her husband. If you know anyone in this type of situation that needs a little bit of help, have them look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Do us a favor and like this video, subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast, and we will talk to you soon.